When my grandfather was a boy, growing up in Fiji in the mid to late 1950s, he and his siblings experienced some strange occurrences on our family's land. They lived in a one-story house on the estate, and every day they had to go down to the river to fetch buckets of fresh water. Every now and then, my grandpa would hear these odd slurping noises coming from the kitchen area. It was keeping him awake at night. He would try to convince his older brothers to go and see what the sound was, but they were already sleeping. They would just tell him to ignore it or to go away. So, one night, he plucked up the courage to go and see what it was. He told me that, hunched over one of the buckets of water on the kitchen bench, was the shadowy figure of a small child, so dark it was practically black. In fact, all he could really see of it was just the whites of its eyes and its teeth. It stopped drinking, looked at him, smiled, and ran off. He told me that he followed this thing outside, just in time to see it scurry under the house. So he got on his hands and knees, and he crawled under there after it. But once he was there, it had disappeared. He said he was under there for quite a while, lifting up chickens and stuff, looking for this thing. But it was gone. But that would not be the last time he would see it. A couple of nights later, he was drifting off to sleep and looking at the big tree just outside his window when he noticed something on one of the branches moving in an unnatural way. His eyes strained in the darkness, trying to make out what it was he was seeing, when he realized it was the thing. The small figure that he had seen just the other night. He darted out of bed and into his parents' room in such a panic that they could barely make sense of his words. This continued for weeks, he told me. Eventually, his parents were forced to move one of his brothers into his room in hopes to ease his imagination. It worked. For a little while. One night, as he was just on the brink of sleep, he heard his little brother call out to him. He rolled over to see him, eyes wide, frozen, just staring out the window. He followed his brother's gaze up to the tree and right to the little dark figure sitting on the branch, just looking down at them with such a big white smile that it almost took up half its face. They stayed awake that night, afraid to move, just looking back at this black figure and its glowing white teeth and eyes. The following morning, they begged their parents and siblings to believe them, but they just assumed it was a nightmare. As my grandpa and his brother got ready for bed that night, they decided to sleep in the same bed to protect each other. He told me he awoke to his younger brother shaking, calling his name again. But when he looked up, the black figure had moved closer to the window, unblinking, still smiling down at them. It then dived off that branch into their window, coming right for them. It stuck to that window, staring right at them for 10 seconds or so, before sliding down and plopping into the hay bale below. He says he does not remember what happened next, but the following morning, he climbed up that tree and hung some trinkets, meant to be good for preventing bad energy. They never saw it in that tree again, and it seemed to stay far away. They would catch a glimpse of it here and there. The last my grandfather ever saw of it, it was standing at the edge of the grasses, looking towards their house. He said he felt like it wanted to come and get him, but he never saw it get close again. And eventually, they moved away. We don't know if, even to this day, maybe it's still there, watching. Fiji is a modern country, although parts of it are still making slow progress towards basic amenities such as electricity. Therefore, it's not uncommon to be disorientated when the city suburbs give way to open countryside, where houses can be miles apart, and their tiny beacons of light can be lost in the wild darkness which can be attractive by day, yet sinister by night. This particular ghostly encounter comes from my father's side of the family. Although he himself is not a believer, the experiences of his various family members often makes me wonder if my father is in denial of such things. However, as I stated, this encounter is from an early period of my father's life, when he was around 12 in the mid-1970s. Growing up in one of the deepest rural parts of Fiji, my father's family has been farming the same land of sugarcane since around 1879, when they were first brought there by British colonials. The land was confiscated forcefully from local Fijians, similar to how the Red Indians lost their land when Europeans took over the West. There was a lot of discontent and severe uprisings among the local villagers, who took their anger out on the White Menace. It was during this period a lot of people, both Indian and Fijian, died from the treatment of their colonial superiors. Finding the traditional practices of mourning lengthy and unnecessary, the British declared such practices as heathen. They banned the burial rites for both cultures. This meant that bodies were often buried in and around the fields, forests and gorges where the sugarcane farming was taking place. Sometimes the bodies would just be thrown into the river or out to sea. Such a lack of respect for the dead, coupled with the absence of proper burial rites designed to guide a soul to the afterlife, meant that, to this day, mourning spirits walk those dark roads, riverways, and fields, searching for what they have lost and what they are never to find. My father's brothers often describe how there were set rules for anyone travelling after dark, for the village was spread over several miles, covered by sugarcane fields, which can be isolated. The rules were never travel alone and never follow anyone who calls out to you. Being young, they would often disregard these rules, especially when returning home from a distant neighbour's after a night of drinking and merriment. One such occasion brought home the severity of their actions and how close to death they had come. My father's brothers were nicknamed Peter and Tarzan. Being young and silly, they decided to play a trick on their younger brother, who had tagged along with them despite their protests. At 4 a.m, with only the stars lighting their way, The three of them set out for home after another night of drinking at their friend's house. Walking the narrow paths through the sugarcane, they came across a river, one they would often follow back home. They walked along the bank at the edge. The two older brothers stopped for a bathroom break. The younger one, realizing that he needed more time and privacy, retreated further into the sugarcane. The two finished their business, and realizing that their brother was taking care of his own business, decided to teach him a lesson for tagging along with them. They quietly slipped away, and they raced back home to their beds, leaving the poor boy alone. Eventually, he came out of the fields, and he approached the river to wash his hands off, not realizing that his two brothers had left him. Looking further up the bank to search for them, he saw a figure in white moving away from him. He called out, and he says that he heard an answering shout. Thinking it was his brothers playing a trick, he followed. Unable to catch up, he yelled for them to slow down, but another shout came back, telling him to hurry up. Mad at their idiocy for risking such a dangerous path next to the slippery riverbank, he just gave up and went home. At that time, he shared a room with his grandmother. When he arrived back home, she merely got up and let him into the house before going back to bed. However, she told everybody later that it was a night she could never forget because he wouldn't let her sleep. He began to talk in his sleep, and he had never done this before. And then, whilst in a deep sleep, he would get up and start walking towards the river. Grandma tells us how she had to tie a rope on one of his wrists so that it would prevent him from going. He kept repeating one thing in his sleep: "They're calling me." In the morning, Grandfather called the three boys before him, and he managed to get the whole story from them. Uncle said that he had never seen my grandfather look so grave and angry. He, in turn, had to get a local priest to ward off whatever it was that my uncle had picked up from the riverbank. By calling to them, he had unknowingly invited them into his life, and they would have taken him into the spirit world had he not been stopped by great-grandmother. My two older uncles learned a harsh lesson. My uncle had come close to death due to their foolishness, a fact that still haunts them to this day. Even today, whenever we visit our grandparents' and dad's ancestral lands, we're not allowed outside after midnight without a proper escort. That deep despair of hundreds of lost spirits still walk our lands, searching for companions on their lonely and never-ending wanderings.
Recently this year, I went to Fiji for one of my uncle's weddings. It was good, but the paranormal stuff didn't happen there. On one of the days, we decided to stay over at my great-grandmother's house near the coast. Everybody knows that all of the houses on our land there are haunted by numerous numbers of ghosts. My mother recounted that 2 people have committed suicide there. 2 premature baby boys were buried alive there near the gazebo, and many others. Anyway, back to the story. Drifted off there. The first night, my dad and my grandfather slept in the guest houses near the lower quarters of the house. My father slept on the bed, and my granddad was on the floor. It was hot. My father woke up to a feeling that something was in the room. Knowing the place was haunted, Dad prayed to God for it to leave him alone. Slowly, my father dozed off again, when suddenly, he felt like something had hit him on the foot, very hard. This happened to him 3 times during the night, and in the morning, my father had a serious limp. He couldn't walk. Now it was my turn. The next night, we all stayed in the main house. The night was good, everything was fine. We left the house and stayed over at another relative's house in the town. I went to bed at about 10-something, listened to some music to try to fall asleep. As soon as I dozed off, I felt like somebody had just shoved me. My sister was next to me and she was sound asleep, no problems. For the next 2 hours, I went through hell. I felt like I was being pushed, shoved. There was a time where I swore in my mind for that thing to leave me alone. It looked like swearing didn't work because the pushes came more harder. Looks like I angered it. I left the room crying and went to my mother. I stayed with her for the rest of the night and didn't sleep until 3 a.m. The next day, my mother told me that one of the ghosts must have followed me and instructed me not to wear a lot of perfume whenever we go to my great-grandmother's house. Can spirits be attracted to strong smells? And can they follow people? Will it follow me everywhere? Am I safe? My father-in-law told me this story once. This was when he and my mother-in-law were still young and dating. It's not a very long story, but it's pretty creepy. After visiting a friend late one night, Mum and Dad jumped into the car and started driving home. Along the drive, they became somewhat lost. They were relatively new to this area and still struggling to navigate the many winding dirt roads. Somewhere along the way, Dad found himself driving down a very quiet road. Apparently, it was once an old burial ground, but now there had been houses and shops built over it. While they were driving down the long narrow road, they saw just ahead a group of people walking on the road towards them. Dad just thought that they were a bunch of drunks walking home from the bars. This road is also connected to the city, just touching the outskirts. Knowing this fully well, he sounded the horn to get their attention, but they didn't seem to notice at all. Mind you, this is around 3 a.m. in the morning. So since Dad was pretty tired, he decided to drive straight but slow to force them out of the way. But no matter how close he got to them, they didn't seem to notice him. They didn't even flinch. As Dad got closer, he noticed some odd things. They were all very old looking. Their skin was all wrinkled up, and they looked exhausted. It was when they passed by the car and looked inside that something felt very off though. My dad said it was like looking through a veil that human beings are not meant to witness. Instantly, he realised what they were. He then stepped on the gas and shot straight through them, desperate to get away from there. The fact that he literally drove through them was enough evidence for both Mum and Dad. They never took that road again.
We're a fishing family, and we usually collect the traps at night in the mangroves when the tide is coming in. One night, about midnight, my 2 cousins accompanied me fishing. As all of we Fijians love reggae music, we began to sing reggae songs loudly out in the midst of the mangroves. After about 20 minutes, we fell into a silence. We could hear something, like splashing, out there in the mangroves. We all headed for the roads, and as we entered the edge of it, a shower of pebble rocks started to come right at us, but didn't actually hit us. So we running at least 200 meters. We stopped to catch our breath, and as we were teenagers, it was more of an adventure to us than spooky. We began heading towards home, and as we walked passing a roadside farm, we saw this man standing there, just staring at us. This really spooked us, but thinking it was someone from the village, we never gave it any attention. As soon as we started walking again, we saw the man slowly disappearing. Not out of sight, but really disappearing. Like transparent. After seeing this, we dashed home at a speed that we have never ran before. And after that, we never spoke about it again. Next night, we went to the other side of the mangroves to collect the traps. Passing the graveyard, it never gave us a fright because we grew up near there. Upon returning, we passed the graveyard again, and my cousin seemed to stick closer to me, holding onto my t-shirt. I didn't mind because we're always playing around. As soon as we passed that graveyard, both my cousins took a sigh of relief. Upon questioning them, they told me that they saw that same man again, but this time, he was holding a spear. They got spooked again upon seeing him standing there. I asked them why they held my t-shirt, and they told me that they didn't want me to run off and leave them behind if I saw it. After that freakish night, we all headed home, and as we went to bed, I felt as if someone was staring at me from the trees. It seemed like a shadow and gradually disappeared. Now, whenever I am at my island home, I sense someone is watching me from the tree next to my window. I will be heading home again this year, and I really hope it does not happen again.